Hello, this is James Watson. I'm giving you guys my third presentation of the class for Automotive Management 360. This is going to be about the government and the automotive industry and the roles that it plays, specifically with emissions and safety testing. So what is safety and emissions testing? A car safety and emissions inspection is a government inspection regulated by each state individually. It's going to make sure that the car is safe to drive and that it goes down the road the way it should. And then really the big part of, I think, that aspect is more emissions testing, just to make sure that it's not emitting too much pollution for that vehicle, and trying to help cut down on all the emissions going on in our country right now. So to break them down a little bit more, a safety inspection. This is kind of a generic list. Each individual state will have their own aspects of safety that they will be checking. But for this generic list, they're going to be looking at horns, windshield wipers, mirrors, steering system, seat belts, brake system, tires, wheel assembly, lights, vehicle identification numbers, window tinting, and gas caps. It's going to be a certified technician that is going to go through each of these aspects and make sure that they work. Depending on the state that you're in, they'll actually have a checklist that they'll go down and they'll put a check mark along each side of all these as they pass or fail them. And then going into a little bit of the emissions testing, they're going to check the gas cap pressure, or they're going to pressure test the gas cap, make sure that there's no leaks going on inside of the evap system. And then they're going to do an onboard diagnostic check. Basically, you're going to check for check engine lights, ABS lights, any dash light that could appear on there will most likely fail you in almost every single state that has emissions testing. And then a lot of states that do emissions testing, they'll actually have a dyno that the vehicle will drive up on, and they'll actually put a sensor on the back of the tailpipe, and they will check the emissions that come out of that vehicle there on the dyno on the spot. So I chose Utah to give a little bit of more information on what they do. Like I previously said, each state will do different testing, and they're all generically about the same, but some will be a little more in depth than others. I picked Utah because I lived in Utah for a little bit, and I had to jump through hoops to do their testing. So basically their testing is vehicles that are built after 1968 will have to be emissions and safety tested. Also, this is probably one of the more interesting aspects of this that I guess you could say I find humorous, is that not all counties within the state require it. So not only is this not federally mandated yet for the testing aspect of buying used cars or having your car checked every so often, but it's also not, the whole state doesn't require it. It can be based on your county like Utah does. But in the counties in Utah that have testing, most testing is done every 2 years for vehicles that are 6 years old or older. I said that right. But each vehicle, so if a vehicle is much older, for example, if it was a 1968 or a 1969 vehicle, you will not have to get through emissions and safety testing done as frequently as you would if you bought a newer vehicle. Also, it's kind of how they can, they can hold your registration hostage by doing this if you fail. So you cannot renew your registration if it does not pass these testing, or even if you're trying to buy a new vehicle and that vehicle that you purchased doesn't pass the emissions and safety testing in Utah, you can't actually register in your name until it does. So the new owner of that vehicle is going to have to make sure to go through and get all that fixed before they can register in their name. Do I think it's a good thing? As a mechanic here in Michigan, I see the plus and minuses of it. I do not agree with the emissions testing. I think it's more of a hassle than anything, and I think we could go without it. But the safety aspect of the testing, I think, is actually a good idea. I get a lot of cars that come in. I work at a Chevrolet dealership, and they're there for a recall, and I have to do an MPVI of the vehicle and make sure that look over the vehicle while it's on my hoist, and I have to note everything I see. And I'll tell you guys, I see some of these cars that they shouldn't be driving on the road, and these people will decline these repairs, and they only want their free recall done. And it's kind of funny to think about, but at the same time it's not, because these are vehicles that are driving next to you on the road. So, it's I think safety-wise, it's probably a good thing. It would be a great thing if Michigan would start doing that, but emissions, I think we could do without it. Unfortunately, I feel like you get both of them as a pair. You usually don't get one or the other. So maybe that's something the government can look at down the road. So I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation and learned a little more about the emissions and safety testing, and I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.